Hello, hello! Hello, Nicole! Hello, Andrea! Hello, Glenn! How are we all doing? Ooh. Hope you're all doing good. Hope you're liking the new camera angle as well. Let me change some stuff up. Go. Hey. Good, how about you? Yeah, I'm doing good. I'm doing good. Ready for another portfolio review session. It always seems to line up with portfolio day for some reason. Which is good. So happy portfolio day, everyone. Even though sometimes I wonder that they happen too frequent, but that's not the point. Hey, Vibu! Hi, Tim. How are you doing? I'm doing great. Thank you so much. Got my pen as well. How is everyone else doing in the chat? Yeah, it's been good. Yeah, where do I begin? Like, not with the portfolio reviews, but what I've been doing today is I've been working on like a new chapter in Beyond Extend, I would say. Like, it's a pretty big change of what we've been doing up until this point. Well, what I've been doing up until this point. I've been writing like weekly tips for like the last 4 to 5 years, right? And I thought it was time to kind of stop doing that. Because I kind of was I don't know. I was kind of getting to a point where the weekly tips were kind of a struggle for me. I was like, let's switch it up, you know? Let's do something new. Let's try something else. So today I spent my entire day writing a script for one of our first proper tutorials for YouTube. So yeah, I'm pretty excited about that. It's going pretty well, actually. Having a lot of fun. I've been tweaking the setup a little bit, so you can kind of see like the setup has changed a little bit. So we got the camera there now. Yeah, I've been having a lot of fun with it so far. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of stuff that I still need to get into place, right? Like doing the proper editing and like making sure that the lighting is good and making sure that the audio is good. Like still finishing touches on all of it, but I like it so far. So yeah, I'm curious to see where this new adventure goes. Plus also like a book. I mean, over the last couple of years, I've written like a pretty decent book of like, I don't know, 250 plus pages now. So I don't want it to become a book that's like almost 1,000 pages and become so unwieldy that no one's ever gonna read any of it, right? Well, no, I think that the environment handbook is in a good place right now. So yeah. Yeah, there was a whole bunch of other stuff in the update. Video sounds more fun. Did catch your update video. All the best, Tim. Oh, thank you so much, Vivu. Thank you so much. Anyway, I'm not gonna go through the whole update video again. Feel free to watch it if you're a member of the community. What we're here about today is for some portfolio reviews. So let's dive straight into that, shall we? We've got our first portfolio here from Nicole Harris. She's a game art graduate from the UK. As you might know, like I tend to do this always kind of in the same sort of fashion. There's like a loose guideline that I keep myself to. So first of all, I want to start with like first impressions, right? Just a really quick first impression. I got an interesting body of work here, right? Like very varied in terms of like the sort of style and like the sort of topics that you chose to go for, Nicole. So we got something detective-y, then we got something like medieval, then we got something fantasy, and then we got something cowboy-y, right? Like very varied in like the amount of topics that we're gonna touch. Which is cool, right? It shows that you're very versatile and that you have an interest in like different topics, right? So I think that can be a benefit. And it makes you more hireable, right? Because games change all the time. Unless maybe you're gonna work for like EA and you're working on FIFA, right? Then I mean, it's pretty much guaranteed that you have to love football at that point, or like be interested in it at least. But usually, like other game companies will kind of switch between like different styles, or not necessarily styles, but like topics, right? Like different type of games. So yeah, pretty good overall overview. What I would say though is we've got like the game art graduate title going on here, right? You'll have to be a little bit more specific, because game art graduate is not really, it's kind of saying what the course tells you to say, right? Like, oh, I just graduated from like a game art course, cool, but it doesn't really say anything about like what you want to become yourself. So I would definitely pick something more specific, like in your case, environment artist, right? So that would be probably something more appropriate to what we can see in your portfolio right here. Hi Blaze! Welcome to the chat. So yeah, something more specific. Something like environment artist would be a perfect fit for your portfolio. Okay, so we kind of got the overall impressions in your title out of the way, so it's kind of time to dive into like the work itself. I'll start with like the thumbnails, right? Let me see. I do like this one. Let me scroll a little bit more down so that you can see all of it. I do like that one, right? Very unique. Like the title itself, like with the font and all that stuff, like it kind of is like a really nice package. Like it's very consistent from the image to the title to like the visuals as well. So I like that it's so consistent. So that's what I like about that one. Then let's have a look. Also, it has a nice bit of contrast, right? Which from the second one, like it's kind of dark, right? Like you don't really see that much of it. So I feel like it might be beneficial, right? If you want to spend the time on this, that if you want to go back and do like a little bit of a relight, maybe make some areas brighter, like have the impact of the fire play like a bigger role in the whole scene, and then work with that blue versus orange contrast way more than you're doing now, could be like an interesting way of increasing the visual interest, especially in the thumbnail, right? So I would say right now it's kind of very dark. And like maybe doing something with the fire. Right? That could be very interesting. Then the next one, it's an interesting one. It's kind of very monotone in the way that you use the colors, right? So there's no real contrast happening. So I'll make a note of that. No real contrast. It's not necessarily that you need contrast between colors like all the damn time, right? But that's the thing that strikes to me now. And then also, we've got these borders, right? And they kind of feel like really inconsistent with the rest of your thumbnails, where like the rest of them are all full screen, and then this one kind of has like the black borders next to it. That would probably be easy. Just go back into the project and like retake like another screenshot, right? That's a little bit more zoomed out, and then you make a thumbnail out of that one. Very easy to fix. Can definitely already help with the way that you want to set yourself up here, right? I would definitely remove the borders from this for sure. And then we have the last two. Coyote's Bounty. I mean, this is so nitpicky, right? But like, the logo is slightly different. Like this one has like a really wide outline and the other one doesn't. So, I mean, very nitpicky, right? But like if you want to get consistency, then you kind of have to match all of it out a little bit. And the same can also be applied to like the size of the titles, right? So I know for the Beyond Extend stuff, we kind of gave you like a template. However, if that doesn't work for the style that you want to go for, or you want to have the title bigger because of consistency in your portfolio, feel free to change it up as well, right? And we can get you like an updated branding pack or whatever you need. We can get that to you. But yeah, I would probably, if we're looking at consistency on the portfolio, right, I would probably go for something that's like right in between these two, where the Beyond Extent one might be a bit too small, but then the Ace of Spades one might be a bit too big. So if you put like 50% in between the two, that might be like a nice, consistent like size that you can work with, right? So that would be taking up this amount of space, and then you can basically just make all your templates or like all the projects that you do like fit that same template. So I would say standardize template layouts, right? So I would definitely say standardize the template somewhat so that you have like a consistent look to all of it. And then like a really quick thing would be to get rid of the borders on especially this one, right? Yeah, that would be my recommendations for the thumbnails themselves. Hi Sodan, hi Benir, hi Renzo, and hi Nimzix. Welcome to the chat. Happy to have you all here. So yeah, that was kind of like the thumbnails, right? There's one more thing that I kind of wanted to discuss because I had a quick look before. And that's these little bits of selections, right? So you added folders for like every year, which is kind of interesting. But I will say that it's mostly interesting for you to keep track of what you made in each year and not necessarily relevant to people coming to your portfolio, if you know what I mean. Like kind of at this point, it would be a thing if you have like a big body of work where you do like multiple projects a year, let's say. I mean, good luck trying to do that in the games industry, but regardless of that, if you have like multiple projects through the same year, then it might be interesting to then start thinking about something like this. But right now, to me, this doesn't really serve a purpose. You know, because if we then go and we say like we click on 2022, right? There's only one piece in here. 23, there's two pieces, which is good, right? But like, there's no one's ever gonna use this because all your work like fits on like one bar anyway, right? So yeah, it's a little bit. I like what your thought process is, right? Because you wanna kind of separate it somewhat. Yeah, if people want to see like the date of it, right? Like usually something like this in the description, right? Says it all. But I would definitely keep this in mind if you want to continue adding work, right? And if you have like a lot of projects that are coming up, could be really cool to have it like chronologically like this. But it's, yeah, at this point, like there's no real added benefit, right? That's what I'm trying to say. Thank you for the podcast. No worries. I'm glad you enjoyed them. Okay, so that was the last thing I wanted to say about like the main page. So now I'm just gonna go through the work a little bit, and we're gonna see if we can kind of see if we can increase the potential of the piece looking at the presentation. I do really like this style though, I gotta say. Also nice choice, like linking the logo, which is red, to like the lines which are red. It's nice. It kind of has Sin City vibes, right? Where like everything is black and white except for the one color. Let's have a look here. I'm just gonna quickly do this on like one of the objects. Yeah, so this is interesting. Oh, Peter is coming in. When scouting, I definitely do check how the journey and development of the artist was, especially when it comes to juniors. But checking each entry date works as well, or maybe add a year to the thumbnails. Yeah, I wouldn't. It's good advice though. But I wouldn't add it to the thumbnail because usually thumbnails are so busy by themselves anyway, right? And you want the focus to be on the art. But yeah, I can now also see why Nicole added it to the folders, because normally what I do when I was looking at portfolios, right, is I would look at like the publish date. But Nicole probably put this on her portfolio like in like the span of a couple of months, let's say, right? So the dates are actually quite similar. This is, yeah, so that's probably why there is like the additional folder aspect, right? To clearly have an indication like, hey, this is older work or whatever. I'll elaborate a bit more on that in just a little bit because I do have some different thoughts on it. But yeah. But yeah, checking each entry's date works as well. Yeah, that's usually how I would do it, right? When I was looking for portfolios. And thanks for doing these reviews public, by the way. I regularly point out juniors to your channel. Oh, that's awesome. Thank you so much, Peter. And Andrea is saying, it looks so cool. It has a clean style to it. Yeah, I like it. Very clean. So we were talking about like the wireframe here, right? As some parts are really dense, I do realize that this is probably like a detective game, right? So there's a potential of you having like an object and you can like closely inspect it and all that stuff. So it probably warrants like a little bit more geometry. So yeah. Let's have a look. What is so weird? I mean, you're barely gonna see that anyway, so it doesn't matter that much, but yeah. These props looks nice and clean though. Oh, Scott's coming in and saying about my previous comment about like the topology being too dense. Could be good to have a lowered lot in that case as well for extra points. Yeah, that's a great shout. Just showing that, you know, because what you're actually trying to show to people that are looking at your portfolio is that you know that this is too high, but you kind of needed it for cinematic purposes. But then you also lower the loads that you can have like a game ready version as well. That's a great shout, Scott. Thank you for that. Yeah, this prop looks nice. These prop look nice. Let me... I'm not gonna do this for everything, right? I just want to have a quick look at the wireframe as well. Yeah. It's looking nice. There are some parts where you could be, like if I were to really scrutinize this, right? Like you could say that some parts look really dense compared to others, right? Like usually a good trick is to zoom out a little bit and to see if you have a bevel like this one here, for example, right? So if you have a bevel like this one here, then you don't really need to have a bevel here anymore, right? Because all you're trying to do is kind of simulate like a bevel of this width. So you don't necessarily need one on like the smaller sides. But overall, pretty good topology though. Yeah, so this is actually quite nice. I like this. Also, just like the consistency of everything, right? It has like a nice style to it, like Andrea pointed out as well. So I like it. I think what I would love to see is do more of a breakdown, right? So what I think is kind of missing is from this post is like quick breakdowns. Because what I call quick breakdowns is just that you have like one sheet with like all the information that you kind of need on there, right? Because these Marmoset viewers, although they're really helpful, like imagine having to open like a Marmoset viewer at scale as like a recruiter, right? If you then have to do that for like 20, 30, 100, maybe more people, right? Like you get to a point where you're probably not going to open that Marmoset viewer anymore. So you still want to have the condensed version of like your wireframe. Your textures, poly count, and like, I don't know, 2 to 3 views of an object, depending on the object, right? We've talked about this like a couple times as well, where you have like, hey, look, this is my object. Let's say just one view for your object, and then you have like, hey, here are the textures that I did, right? And then you have like the poly count next to it, blue, with like a little triangle. And then you could have like your textures as like a little overview. Like literally like a one sheet. It doesn't, you don't have to do this for every prop, right? Maybe 1 or 2 is more than enough. But what you're doing when you're being so open with this information is that you're showing that you're confident about showing it up, right? So also it avoids like the whole issue where, oh, if a recruiter doesn't have time, right? In an ideal world, they would always try to open like each link and blah, blah, blah. But unfortunately, that's usually not the way that it works. So having like quick breakdowns where you have like a little sheet for like, let's say your favorite asset that you worked on for this, right? And you do like a one sheet breakdown and you just add that in. Let's say, oh, stop. Let's say before you do these breakdowns, right? You just have like one sheet with like, hey, here's a little asset breakdown. And then below that, you still do all the Sketchfab stuff, right? And like show all this stuff in detail. But then at least you're not running the risk of no one really looking at this in detail and maybe skipping some valuable information that they might have missed. So I would definitely include something like this. But yeah, the rest of the post, it's quite nice. The last thing that I might add is, let's see. I'm always looking for opportunities to condense information, right? Is like some of these rigs, they look really nice, so I wouldn't remove them, right? Because it shows that you have like additional skills on top of like just the normal modeling and like texturing and all that stuff. So I wouldn't remove them. What I would do is potentially show like both of them in the same screen. Like what you could do is like you could record both separately and then like match them together in like, let's say DaVinci Resolve or something like that. Do a little bit of light editing. And then you would have like a nice presentation for both of them, right? And then potentially do the same for like, yeah, basically this, right? Like these reception props, it's like a nice collection of some of the cool props that you've done. Maybe it might have been worth it to just add everything in one scene, right? And I think even with Marmoset, you can set like predefined like viewpoints. So you could kind of make it a diorama that's like 360 viewable, but then depending on the place where you click, you focus on the lamps, or you focus on the lighter, or you focus on this little reception scene, right? Could be like a very interesting technique on like how to condense all this information into for the breakdown part, right? So yeah, it's like a whole bunch of stuff that we kind of discussed on that side. Overall, a really interesting project though. This I like, as I say again, like I like the visuals of it. Then we go to our own little team challenge here. Obviously, there's going to be a little bit of bias involved in this one. We'll see if we can point some stuff out. Yep. Okay, I think the same can be applied here as well, right? Like game art, like showing that you can do game art where you have this nice looking spear, for example, but then you also show like the textures, right? What do they look like? Maybe you have the sculpt, right? Like just a raw sculpt could be interesting. What the poly count is, and what the no, we kind of have it in the textures, right? So poly count, and then maybe like a wireframe or something like that. Right? So all this game art stuff is super important because the confidence thing, right? Like you show that you're confident about your skills and that you can not only make something look really good, but also execute it well and within a certain budget, right? So the same can be applied to like probably most of these posts, right? I love this melted gate. This looks so good. I like the texturing that you did on it. Yeah, but that's the main thing that I would show off here is more game art stuff, right? Like I want to see more breakdowns, and yeah, have you show it off a little bit more, you know, like go in depth, with it, like be a nerd, be technical, like really show that you took care of like all the aspects. And we're gonna go through this. I think we discussed this, like, I don't know if I did this on stream or not, but I think we talked about this like ages ago. Yeah, this is from last year. Oh, we're seeing some cool stuff happening here. Gotta watch out for that stretching though. There's some significant stretching happening here, so you gotta watch out for that. Oh yeah, this is cool. Little sculpts. Hi William! Just saw the Discord. Happy to have you here. We haven't talked about your work yet, but I think you're up next. Was a cool little project. And this is from 2 years ago. So what I do like here is that we're getting a glimpse, right? Like we're getting a glimpse into your growth in the last couple of years, which is really nice. That's also something that Peter brought up as well. But I do have to say that you have to make sure that, and this is kind of the point that I wanted to bring up before, right? You have to make sure that the work that's on your portfolio, that is still the best foot forward, right? Like you want to show your best work off, because your portfolio is always going to be as weak as the weakest piece, right? Like, or like as good as the weakest piece, or whatever the saying is. So I'm a big fan of potentially, instead of doing like a year by year, like doing like an all and then potentially like an old work or something like that, right? That's what I'm a fan of, because it's about the signals that you send with that, right? Like if you say like, hey, this is my old work, people instinctively know like, okay, like they know that this is not really relevant to what they're doing now, but they still want to have it on their portfolio for like growth or personal reasons, right? So I would definitely call it like old work and potentially put both of those two in there. Maybe even this one. I am pretty sure about these ones. I'm leaning towards a yes on this one, and the reason is because the jump that you've made, right, it's not all negative, right? Like, even though this part is usually perceived as being very negative, but I think you're actually made like a giant leap. Like a giant jump between this project and then this one. Right? Like the techniques that you used, like the implementation of them, like they all feel like more solidified. Especially when you then look at like this project, right? Where like the props that you're doing are clean, they're well executed, they show like a good, you're confident about the topology as well. So I can see that you're making like giant leaps. So I would honestly say maybe keeping these two and then thinking about putting the other three in like an old work kind of folder. That would be the thing that I would think of, right? Again, this is your portfolio. If you're saying like, hey, look, that third project, I still think it can hold up, like compared to my other two projects, like these two, right? Compared to project number 1 and 2, then keep it by all means. But I think it's time to definitely think about something like the Coyote's Bounty, to probably put that in an old folder. I think honestly, like the main benefit there from this project is that it shows that you can do a game project, right? That's like the main draw of this, because the art looks way better in your most recent projects, but it kind of shows that you have like multiple game art projects under, or like just games under your belt, which can be a benefit, right? So I'm not saying to completely remove it. I think it could be still good to keep it on there, but just as the intent to show that you have done multiple games. That's why I would keep it on here. All right, so quick recap. Let me start out with a new slate. So a little recap. Number 1, there's some quick wins that we can do. Wait, let me call it a little bit different. So thumbnail consistency, that's something that we talked about, right? That's like a quick win. Updating the title, right? I'm gonna add that to the list as well. Again, really easy to do. But I always like to see people that come out of the door and saying like, hey, look, I'm an environment artist. Bam. Instead of a graduate or whatever, right? I would try to avoid the word graduate, even though you are, right? Like, but you don't want to give like a company any reason to like potentially undersell you for whatever reason, right? So show a bit of confidence, make an environment artist. Done. Number 3. What did we talk about? Oh yes, presenting game art, right? So this is a fairly common one, I know. And then number 4 is condensing posts. I think I think especially in this case, that's also like an easy win. Oh, also, I just didn't realize that I'm scribbling underneath this chat again, so sorry about that. Every time. Yeah, so condensing the post down, that can help you a lot as well. It's not a lot of work, right? I think the sheets, like the quick overview sheets that I was talking about, where you show game art, where you have like the prop and then the textures and the poly count and the wireframe all on one sheet, they're going to be super helpful because it gets rid of like all the clutter that like all the marmoset posts do, right? And then maybe condensing the marmoset post into one as well. Yeah, that's how I would definitely approach it going forward. And if you maybe find the time, or if you're like, hey, look, it's time to clean up my portfolio, make it super consistent, I would definitely take that into account. So yeah, overall, really good work though. I really like your journey, Nicole. I also have the benefit of seeing your most recent whips, right? Because I like where those are going as well. So I would definitely keep that up. Keep up the work that you're doing. And yeah, at a certain point, if you cleaned up your portfolio, and if you have like a couple of other projects on there, send me another portfolio link. I'll gladly look at it again. All right. Oh yeah, and thank you so much for posting your work, Nicole. Really appreciate it. Now, with that said, we are moving on to William, who is lurking in the chat. Let's have a look at your portfolio, William. Okay. I did do a little bit more preparation this time around. So I had a look at your portfolio already. I tried to do this for like all of them, right? But I really like what I'm seeing here, man. Like, this is looking real nice. 3D environment and prop artist, like that. That's a little checkbox. Dink. Got a solid amount of work as well. I like that it's nice and varied as well. So we got 2 environments. We've got some materials. We got some assets. Some materials. We've got some foliage. And I think that's more focused on props. And this is sculpting, right? So I think you're really hitting like all the notes that you need to become like a very versatile environment artist, right? Because you show a competency in the foliage department, you know how to compose a scene. We're gonna dive into it, but you also show like a competency in like lighting and like making materials and all that other stuff that you need to make an environment, right? So I think you're on a good road, and you have like a really good foundational basis with your skill set, especially. So yeah, I would say like 100%, like be proud of the work that you've already done. And yeah, I'm curious to see where it's gonna go, right? I mean, that sounded like an outro. We're not done yet. We're gonna talk about this more. But yeah, I'm excited to dive in. Hi Samantha! Welcome back. Okay, so one of the things that I did realize, and I was thinking about this before the stream, is like you have one post here, right? Like you have the old memories, like the mentorship post. And then you break that up into like 3 other posts. So I don't know what to say about that. You know, I'll be honest, right? Like because the reason why I say that is because I'm kind of flip-flopping in between like, hey, look, you can probably condense that into like one breakdown post. Just from the perspective of like, hey, I look at this, right? So I look at this post looks awesome. And then you show like a little bit of the assets here. And it's like, cool. And then we go to the next thing. And then it's like, oh, it's only the vegetation. Okay. Vegetation stuff looks really nice, by the way. And then you kind of have the sculpt here as well. And there's just a part of me that is maybe... I mean, look, let's be honest. Go look at my portfolio. I'm not the best example of this. The amount of posts that I've made for Far Cry, I'm still ashamed about, but I'm too lazy to fix it. So let's just say that straight out the gate. But I think you can optimize this a little bit more, right? Like, I think you can easily like put like breakdown. Like you have like the old memories, like main post, right? You have this one, and then you have one where it is like breakdown, right? And then you're kind of scrapping. Well, you're not scrapping, right? But you're putting like these two like into this breakdown post, and you're making it like a nice chunky breakdown post where you're breaking down like all the single things. The main reason why I bring this up is because I think I would want to reduce friction of like, oh, like it's another post about this project. Oh, and it's another post about this project. You know, I want to remove that feeling from ever entering like a recruiter's or like a person that's looking at your portfolio's mind, right? That's kind of like the tactics that I'm going with. Even though, having looked at some of the breakdowns already, like they're quite juicy and there's a lot of stuff in there, right? I think it would still be interesting to kind of combine them somehow. And then you don't have to worry about someone ever feeling like, oh, it's another post about this project, you know? I think that, let's be honest, I think overall, like the chances of that ever happening are going to be relatively low. But I mean, on the opposite end, like if you can remove that from ever entering someone's mind, then it's better, right? Scott is coming up with the example of separate tabs where you have like a project and a breakdown tab. Yeah, you could do that. You could definitely do that. That would be one way to approach it, right? What you could also do is just include it in the thumbnail, right? And this is highly dependent on what you want to do with your portfolio, right, William? So what you could also do is maybe do, what was it called again? Old memories. So you would do something like old memories, and then, well, that would be the thing, I guess. And you could do old memories. And you could do like, I mean, don't write it in like weird hacky sentences, right? Like do something where you can see the difference between like, oh, the old memory logo here, and then you have like the old memory like font or whatever you want to do with it, with like a little breakdown next to it, so that it's clear that this is the main post, and then you have the breakdown. That could be one way to apply it. You could also do it in the way that Scott said, where you have separate tabs. Great feedback. Again, thanks for doing this. Kind of makes me want to go back 20 years in time and become a student again. If only we could go back in time. Got to go. Have a great time. Thanks for popping in, Peter. And thank you so much for recommending it as well. That's awesome. Wait, what did it say? Your message cuts off, Scott. Let's have a look. Or neon pink, please. Oh, yes, please. Don't do neon pink on it. Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, but enough about that, right? I think overall, the thumbnails are looking really nice, right? Like there's a lot of stuff to look at here, and I think all of it looks like really nice and high quality. So again, great job at that. I think, let's see, what are some of my favorites, right? This is arbitrary, has nothing to do with what you need to remove or something like that. I just want to point out some of my favorites. I like those three the best. like the old memory post, the old memory foliage, because I don't know, there's something so nice about like foliage on like a great background, right? Like the way that you presented it looks really nice. And then also the post down here, which is partly obscured by my mug. Let me, oh no, I can't scroll down. Damn it. I swear to you, this looks nice. You gotta trust me, okay? Yeah, a great presentation. Very clean, very elegant. I like it. Now, let's dive in to some of these posts, right? A lot of vegetation. I'm a fan of this sort of presentation where it's like nice, clean, like grayish background with just like a bit of foliage on it. You make like a little area and then put a tree on it. Looks real nice. These close-ups are really nice as well. I would say, again, it's one of those things, right? Like, I would probably stick with this close-up rather than this one. Just because this... there's a couple of things, right? Like, okay, let's get nerdy. Let's get into the weedy things. So, this is too flimsy. Which makes me think like, why didn't you remove that one, right? Because no one's ever gonna see that, and it's probably adding like a decent chunk of like geometry to the whole thing. Also, like, it's pretty sparse, right? Pretty sparse overall. Yeah, I think just also because we have the benefit of comparing the two, right? If we then go down to here, like this one looks nice, right? This one looks really nice. Anyway. This is one thing that you have to watch out for, right? And I brought this up with Nicole's portfolio as well. Think about ways where you can condense without sacrificing any of the visuals that you want to put on display, right? Because you have like a bunch of interesting stuff, but I feel like a lot of it can just be like really condensed to like the core of it, right? Where you could have, let's see, how would I do this? Because I'm thinking, right? So we have 4, 6, 8, 10 of these. Right? 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. So that means that you can almost do like a 6x6. Right? And just have it on like 2 images. What'd that look like? Almost have something like that, right? As like one image, and then do that 2 times. And then you're basically condensing like 12 images into 2. And then you can still do something with the presentation, right? It's like, oh, this is small foliage, this is medium foliage, and this is large, or whatever it is, right? Still do something with that where you have the color and the gray version laid out like that. It's like a nice overview. Really interesting. Again, I'm always looking for these opportunities to optimize the amount of time that someone spends on like a single page, right? Because you kind of have to look at it from like a perspective of like, okay, you're kind of asking a lot if I have to scroll down, especially these long images, right? Like if you're asking me to scroll down like, I don't know, let's say 20 times, right? Yeah, that's what I would say. Man, and also a very personal thing. We discussed this a couple of times before, where people show their materials. I've heard pros and cons from both sides. I personally, so take this as my personal opinion, right? Not as advice, is that I don't really see the benefit of you showing speed tree. I think showing off the end result is gonna do more for you than showing off like a node graph that doesn't really show anything, right? Because arguably what you would be most interested in is this section, right? It's like, oh, how was it made? But you can't see that. So what you're putting on display is just like a weaker presented version of something that you presented like really well before, right? Like this presentation speaks a lot more to the actual visual quality of the stuff that you're putting on display rather than taking like these screenshots from SpeedTree. I would honestly, I mean, I'm not opposed to like changing my opinion on this at all, right? But I would be curious what other people think about this, especially foliage artists, right? Like if they're looking for people that post SpeedTree because they can tell like, oh, how something is constructed, maybe. But then in my opinion, like that's the stuff that you were to show like in the interview, right? Where you do like, hey, look, I have like a hidden post where I have like all the real nerdy stuff. Like I didn't care about the presentation. This is just like all the raw stuff that I want to share with you. And then you show them like all the setups and like all the nerdy stuff behind the scenes. That's the way that I would potentially approach it here. Because yeah, this doesn't really feel like it adds a lot of value to your portfolio. Yeah. Thanks. Love that. Thanks. No worries, William. Yeah, I know that we're getting into the nitty-gritty here, right? I would love... Yeah, that's sometimes... I mean, you're hearing it from one person here, right? Like on this live stream. I would love to sometimes hear like a counter to it. But I'll have to speak to people about that. Yeah, no. So I think that this can definitely be like way optimized, right? And I think from what I looked at before, the same can kind of be applied here, right? And it's I think you know that, right? Because this speed tree thing, you kind of added it at the end, and it's like, it's kind of like a throwaway thing. Well, apart from this one, I guess. And in this one, you could even make the case that you could maybe look at the triangles, right? But I think you presented your work so well. If you then want to present it in a way where you want to show off the wireframe or you want to show off the poly count, right? Like, I'm sure that you can find like a way more visually appealing way to do so than just having like a raw screen capture from SpeedTree. I'm sure about that. Maddie in the chat is saying, I really love the way the leaves are sculpted. Yeah, 100%. Like, all this stuff is looking gorgeous. I like it. I really like it. It's a great job. 100% agree. And that counts for the last post as well, right? Like, the stuff that you're putting on display looks really gorgeous. Yeah, stuff is great. Stuff is great. The same can be applied to like this post as well a little bit, right? But I don't think this post is as troublesome as the other one. I think this one is actually fairly condensed. Apart from some of the SpeedTree stuff, right? But looks real nice. I think as an added thing, what you could also do here is have a screenshot of the actual scene, right? If you were to keep these individual breakdown posts, right? Like have a picture of the actual scene where you can see the tree as it is in the scene, and then kind of have like the beauty shots below it, right? That's kind of the only thing I'm missing here. Well, okay, so let's do a little breakdown. So what would I do a little bit differently? Is that still try to show game art a bit more? Well, honestly, I think this one is pretty good, right? Because you have like all these breakdowns, so we kind of know what your UV layout is going to be. You kind of have your poly counts that can be improved a little bit, but yeah. No, this is good. This is good. Scopes. Let's go for the big boy. Hey, 3D Blur! Andrea saying, honestly, so beautiful. Yes, I know, right? It's looking nice. Looking through ArtStation at the moment, none seem to show speed tree. No, there are no poly counts. Yeah, foliage is a different world. Yeah, it would still be good, right? Like in my opinion, to show like a poly count, because I would argue that I really love the foliage post, like Scott was saying. You're making Scott want to switch to foliage, so that is like as good of a recommendation you can get, Will. Yeah. What I was gonna say for the foliage, like poly count to be on foliage is even more important, because foliage is something that is gonna be used in the world like by the thousands, if not 10,000s, right? So like an adjustment of like, let's say 1k tries could have the impact of like so much, right? Like it depends on how much it's scattered, but like it could have an impact where it sometimes goes into like, hey, we're saving like hundreds of thousands, if not millions of polys at this point. So that's why I lean more to like having beautiful but also optimized foliage, because that's the real trick, in my opinion, is making beautiful foliage that's also optimized at the same time. That's where the tricky part comes into play. Yeah, but this shot is looking really nice. I like the beauty shots. I like the little breakdown where you show off the vertex paint, little gifs. Same can apply here, like a little bit more game art, right? Where you break down certain things, like what do the wireframes look like, what do the textures look like, some of that stuff. And I'll bring up why, actually. So we're gonna jump down to this post. And you kind of do that here, right? Like this is what I kind of want to see. But the flaw here is, and I'm pretty sure that you know this by now, Will, because you've grown so much, and I think this is, yeah, from 10 months ago, right? And in that time span, you've probably learned so much about this, is that you do a great job of putting your stuff like in full blast here, but like there's a lot of waste in these UVs. And actually, if we look at the whole thing, right? If we look at your whole portfolio, and I was to look at this, my thought process, right? If I'm looking to get you hired, is like, oh, this person has like a lot of, okay, like a lot of waste. Like his stuff looks cool, right? But there's like a lot of waste on their UVs or like their textures. Maybe that's a hint towards that they don't really know how to make the most out of their texture sheets, right? But if you then go to like your newest project and you show like texture sheets and like the UVs are packed or they are like clean, right? then I'm immediately like, cool, this person learned, no skin off my back, you know, like I'm not worried anymore. But if you don't show it, like this is the thing that I'm going to be stuck with in my head. It's like, oh, does this person makes beautiful art, but do they know how to fill like a UV, right? And it's something so stupid, but you want to kind of remove like as much doubt as you can, especially if you're in the running against other people that do show the one screenshot where they do show like a breakdown, right? And I know that this is we're really getting into the weeds of things, right? But I'm hoping that I'm conveying that, especially in a climate like we are now, where junior jobs are kind of hard to get, right? Especially from all the people that I've talked to, this is make or break. It's yeah, that's the way that I see it. William is saying, I really don't like these breakdowns. I actually saw one of portfolio review that you did months ago, and I saw the problem with that post. Yeah, and I knew you did, right? So this is not me putting you on full blast for something that you should have fixed, right? That was not my intent here, and I think you know that. But I just wanted to show that this is like a setup that you can use and then just make it beautiful again, right? Like apply your presentation skills that you've learned with your recent mentorships and like the recent things you've been doing, and just apply the same sort of thinking when it comes to presenting your texture sheets as well. Because yeah, the presentation of them is like really basic, right? Like these are just like two textures. What you could do, and I mean, maybe I'm going to repeat like the exact portfolio review that you saw from a while back, is to me what's always important is that there's a relation between the actual game object and then also the textures that you're showing to me, right? So again, we would have your object, maybe multiple views, and then you would have like your little textures, right? And then you could have like additional information down here. Again, this is like the sort of template that I kind of stick to, right? But you get to decide how you present that, right? You could also do something different where maybe you have like your different textures on the top, and then maybe you have like different views from your model, and then some additional information there, right? It doesn't have to be like this template that I'm throwing out here, right? It can be something completely different, and I completely trust you when it comes to finding the best way to approach that for your work, right? So yeah, but that was just like to set the precedent of like why showing game art is good and how it can kind of help. It can kind of make or break your work, right? Like when I see this and I don't see that you've like learned and improved upon this, like I'm still concerned about the fact that you might not be able to like fill out like a UV sheet. That was the whole point. Because yeah, honestly, like the visuals, you know, like I don't even have to say anything. Like they speak for themselves, right? Like they look really nice. So I do 100% believe that you know what you're doing on like an artistic front, right? You show competency in that, like through and through to every project. It's just the game art side of things, right? But yeah, I mean, this looks beautiful, right? So nice. There's like a small things that I kind of wanted to bring up here. It's like that doesn't need a bevel. Right? Because you're baking it down, so with that bake, you can get all that information that you're trying to replicate with a bevel. Even though you're getting pretty up close, right? Like maybe you could have like, I don't know, like two edges instead of like the amount that you have there. But it's small. You realize that this is small, right? This is nitpicking. The rest of this looks really nice. Got some sculpts here. some sculpts. I think, yeah, the only thing that can make it like a little bit better is just having this sheet a little bit sorted out and in reference to the actual object, right? But yeah, it's looking really nice. Aladdin is going in and he's saying, man, William's work is perfect. And also asking how I'm doing. Yeah, I'm doing great. Thank you so much for asking. Cool. So we kind of went through like a bunch of these posts. Great stuff. I'm gonna quickly go through like a couple of other ones, right? To see if we can identify something that we haven't really talked about. Yeah. Really nice and clean presentation. I like these a lot. These are really nice and clean. Again, the compression of it, like the condensing of the post comes up again, right? But that's the only thing that I would say. Like the rest of it looks really nice. Beautiful renders as well. Then we have some of the material posts. Nice little presentation. Got a little bit of depth of field going on. Always does a great job. Yeah. I like it. Very cinematic feel as well, with like the depth of field and like the use of the cameras, right? Like very interesting shots here. Thanks for all the useful tips. Love the review. Oh, you're welcome, Lydia, and thank you so much. Yeah, but I love the little overview that we have here. Yeah. Cool. So from when was that? That's 11 months ago, right? Yeah. And then when was this? 4 months ago. Nice work, man. And was this in between then? 10 months ago? Yeah, man. You're really grinding out work, man. Like the quality of it is also really nice. Like it's awesome to see someone's trajectory, right? And you're on a path, man. It's looking awesome. I think honestly that's the majority of the stuff that I wanted to bring up. Let's see. Like I did make some notes. Oh, yes. There was one thing that I wanted to bring up, right? And this is not like any form of feedback, really. This is more a question. This is more a question that I want to put to you, and you don't have to answer it now, but it's something that I want you to take away from this conversation, right? And it's so you say that you're a 3D and environment, like 3D environment and prop artist, right? But you seem to focus a lot on foliage as well. So I'll put the question to you is, what do you want to specialize in, right? Like, what do you want to get a job as? Because the fact of it is, the more that you're going to put on your portfolio of that thing that you want to do, that's increasing the likeliness that you're going to get a job in that, right? So this can be both be a good and a bad thing, right? Because I like where you're showing your variety, right? But there might also be the counterpoint coming from certain studios, let's say, where they say, cool, you have like a lot of things, like a lot of variation, but what do you actually want to do? And I feel like that question is going to come up at a certain point. I just don't know when. So that's something to think about. Like, what do you actually want to spend like 8 hours a day working on? Because that's what you'll be doing at the end, right? So give that some thought. think about it, and then maybe focus your next project more on that, so that that one thing becomes a stronger representation on your portfolio. That will be my last tidbit of advice. Other than that, let's do a little recap. What did we talk about? So let me see that I don't write like over the chat this time. Let me add a little bit over this. So recap. Number 1, condensing posts, right? That was the let me call it optimizing posts. So number 1 is optimize posts. What else did we talk about? Oh yes, game art, right? Like game art. Game art showcase. I'm kind of doubtful that there was like a number 3. I really think about one. Yeah, I think these ones, these were the main ones, right? Like optimizing the post, and as both in. Yeah, thank you, Scott, for bringing that up. Like the speed tree images. That's kind of what I meant with like optimizing the post, right? There's 2 ways that I wanted to bring this up. I'll write it down. So speed tree images, right? Speed tree, and then also the breakdown posts. Writing behind the chat again. You get the point. So what I was saying there is just like optimizing the posts themselves, right? Like the actual content of the posts, where you can kind of condense like the amount of images there. And then also optimizing the posts from like a perspective where maybe this one post doesn't need like 3 breakdown posts, right? You can probably condense that into like one post that's like really chunky and really full. Yeah, and then the second one is bringing up the game art more, like showing more breakdowns, being confident about your textures and all that stuff too. That will be like my little recap for this. Thanks again, William, for sharing your work. Again, yeah, I love your work. Like it's really nice to see your trajectory, right? And I feel like you're gonna go far, right? It sounds so silly to say that, but like I like the stuff that you're putting on display, and like I like your attention to detail, right? Yeah, so I'm just really curious where you're gonna go. Looking forward to it. And before we jump into Alan's work, let me catch up with the chat a little bit as well, because William was saying, like, this was kind of replying to my question. I love environment art in general, but foliage is something that I really enjoy to do. Yeah, so that would be a thing, right? Like if you really enjoy foliage, like you can put more foliage on your portfolio, because then the likeliness of you getting hired for that is going to increase, right? For me, that was actually the opposite, where I did a foliage project, right? And then after that, like I got transferred to do foliage at my job that I was currently working. But I never really wanted to do it like 8 hours a day, right? It was kind of like, oh, I'll explore it for a project and then I'm gonna move on to something else. So I didn't really like it. So yeah, that was basically like why I was explaining the whole thing, right? Like I don't want people to get into a position where they build a portfolio for a job that I don't want to work 8 hours a day, right? And obviously there's an element to it where it's really hard to predict what you want to be doing for 8 hours a day, and you're also just probably going to be glad that you can work in the games industry and get to do this full time, right? But over time, that's still something that will help you define your own path, right? Like your own artistic path. So it's something to think about in the long term. And it might bend, and it might like be something else like once you tried like the thing that you thought you did, right? Maybe you don't love it when it's like your job, like, but that's fine. You can still pivot. Vibu is asking, what do you feel is the most effective condensed way to show your texture maps to, say, a hero prop? Kind of what we've been saying like all along is just you have your prop and you have the textures right next to it, and then also your wireframe is on there. Like maybe you have one render that is full color, you have another render that is wireframe, and then you display your texture maps next to it, and then you have like a little thing saying like, oh, this is the poly count, and this is the size of the textures as well. That's one that I forgot about. Something like that, right? You're basically I would say there's not the most effective way, right? Like everyone kind of does it in their own way, as long as the content of it is all there, right? So like all the stuff that I just brought up, if you can display that in a visually pleasing way, that's probably the most effective way of doing it. Aladdin is also asking a question, and I will move on to Alan's portfolio. I have a question. I've never used a blog on my ArtStation, but I heard from a friend that I can use it to show the stages or breakdown of the creation process of my portfolio. Is that true? Yes. Yes, very short answer. Yeah, that is true. I would not do it for a breakdown. I would keep my blog for work in progress, right? Because people want to see, or like people enjoy seeing the creation process, right? And if they can then look at your finished piece and you link to your own blog, and it's like, oh, look at the whole work in progress. That's interesting to some people, right? I don't think it's necessarily relevant in all cases to getting hired, but it can be, right? Because maybe there's some stuff in your blog that shows that you understand something on like an artistic level, where it shows your artistic decisions, right? And like maybe if you make like very good decisions, like that will be something that they really liked about your blog. So yeah, I mean, also that's where I started, right? Like this whole thing, like this live stream and Beyond Extend, that's all because I started a blog on ArtStation. So I used to do like a weekly update for whenever I was working on stuff, like just by week, every Thursday. Okay. Thanks for the feedback and your time. Really appreciate it. Yeah, no worries, William. Like, happy to do it. Thank you for posting your work again. Okay. I think it's time for the last one for today. So we're gonna end it off with Alan Field. Thank you so much for posting your work, Alan. Again, first overall impressions. Let's have a look. So we've got like a pretty generic looking banner, right? Like Alan Field, environment artist. The work is definitely aligned with it, right? Cool. Not that much to say on this one, right? Like the overall impression is pretty decent. I'm I'm really curious. Like a lot of it is like real life, and then we have like this demonic pillar. So I hope, or like I think this could be cool as like an introduction to like, hey, look, I'm not only doing like real life stuff, but I'm also doing like crazy otherworldly fantasy stuff too, right? But it's kind of interesting to just see like a gas station, like a nice what is it, like a nice corner, and then like a hacker lab, and then just like a demonic pillar. um yeah, interesting. Okay, so I would say let's talk about the thumbnails a little bit more, right? I think my personal favorites are, I think, these ones. There is there's something here. I don't know, it feels unfocused. But we already, didn't we? Oh, it might have been the work in progress Wednesday that I did. I think we already talked about that in the work in progress Wednesday, where the whole scene kind of felt like a little bit unfocused. We won't be diving into that there. We're just gonna stick to the presentation, but yeah, the thumbnail kind of has the same sort of vibe, right? Like I don't really know what I'm looking at there. Like it doesn't have like clear focus. Where if you look at the one just left to it, right? That is like awkwardly obscured partially by my face and then like a whole bunch of other stuff happening, but I can guarantee you that feels more focused, right? Like it has let me actually show you. Like on the main image. Right? The thumbnail is kind of something like this. But it kind of benefits from having like a lot of contrast. Right? Because it's night and then you have the bright lights, and that then turns into what was I gonna say? Oh yeah, like that's gonna lead to getting like a good focal point just by itself. Right? Because you're gonna be focusing on like this stuff and not really on like all the other stuff because it's so dark, right? So inherently by the setup of the environment, it's already gonna look more interesting and gonna work better as like a thumbnail than something that's like midday lighting, like it's pretty uniform, right? There's barely any contrast there. That's already gonna make a big difference on like the thumbnail. Yeah, so that was like on the thumbnail side, right? Oh, there's one more thing. It's this one, right? Like hacking in progress. I don't know. I kind of don't like it. But then it's also not as bad as my instinct tells me to. Because like it kind of works within like the setting, right? Like you have like a dark border, like that's perfect to put something into, and it kind of adds like more than if you were to just have it dark, right? So if you didn't have this text, I would probably have picked like a different camera angle that shows you like a more interesting angle. And that's probably the gist of it, right? Like right now it's kind of like, oh, hacking in progress, but like the main reason is, or like the main feeling is, what am I looking at? Right? And if you have like a close-up shot of like, let's say the desk itself, and you see someone hacking, or like you don't have to show someone hacking, right? But like the screen with like some random code on it, and then like a bunch of hacker equipment surrounding it, that would do a better job to convey the actual purpose and the story behind the environment than just showing like a computer room, but it's not really clear what it is, and then just typing like hacking in progress. Like maybe I'm kind of trying to explain my thoughts here, right? Maybe that's why I don't like the hacking in progress, because it feels like it's a band-aid for something that can be solved visually. that makes sense. Like the hacking in progress is there to kind of support, or like to add the story where you could have added that story in visually. That's my opinion on it, at least. And also, like, it's a consistency thing, right? Like, you have like clean thumbnails, and then you have the one with like hacking in progress. Like, it's kind of, I mean, it's a smaller thing in the grand scheme of things, right? Because, but yeah, you still want to pay a little bit of attention to it. All right, so let's have a look at the actual work. Where do we begin? I was most enticed by one of these two, right? But I've kind of already seen this in Work in Progress Wednesday, so I'm going to click this one. I can't take my eye on the prop to the right. Yeah. It's also because it stands out, right? Like in terms of just the thumbnails, like the contrast is also, the contrast is there. I think it's also like the contrast of the amount of details that you have on the prop versus the contrast of the background itself. It's simple versus detailed, right? Like there's something happening there that works to just like lead you in, right? So that's actually something that can be used in thumbnail design as well, right? Where you can purposely pick something that has that sort of detail, right? Like a very detailed thing on like a bare bones wooden table, for example. Yeah, let's have a look at this first pit stop. Have a quick glance. Marmoset stuff here. Prop breakdown. Emissive grunge, parallax material. Okay, so this is an interesting one, right? Like, wait, let's keep that for later. We're diving into the weeds. So I would say overall pretty good, right? I like that you're showing off like how the tools work and what you did with the tools, right? So very interesting stuff there. I always like it when you have like little demonstrations of the stuff you did. I would say overall, on the presentation side, the contrast works well, right? That's kind of the thing that we discussed before. I feel like it lacks from depth. Like, most importantly, let's scroll all the way down, right? Like, the concept art is, I don't know, it's a little hit or miss when it comes to my personal taste, right? Like, I feel like the emissive is kind of like overblown, and it kind of has like lens flare kind of vibes to it, which is like a little bit too much. However, what I do like about the concept is like the depth that it gives, because you have like this fog, right? Like you have this separation between like the gas station and then the stuff behind it, because there's like fog sheets in between, right? So I feel if we then compare that to this, yours is like, it just lacks in depth when it comes to it, right? So having like a little bit of fog separation, a little bit of atmospheric height fog, a little bit of distance fog, be very interesting here to really add. Well, you're kind of doing it in the back. There's kind of stuff happening. Yeah. Yeah, okay, so there's kind of some stuff happening in the back, but it's not enough to really separate like the foreground from the background or something like that, right? Like it doesn't add enough. But then let's talk about the presentation, like the content of the actual post, right? I would say that these two whip images don't really add any value to it. Let me see. I think I'm very black and white on this, right? I think if you want to show whip, you need to show me like like a GIF, right? When we're going through like the whole process of how you made stuff, so that I can really pick at like, oh, this is cool. So he made the decision to move it back or like separate the two buildings or something like that. But now there's no comparison, right? Like this is just like, okay, early block out. Cool. Like I don't know. Like it doesn't really add any value to the content of the post, at least in my opinion. Right. So I would probably not do the whip images here. Let's actually use this for notes, right? Oh, of course, it's partially behind like the chat. Great stuff. Yeah, so that's about the whip images, right? So I don't think they're necessary. I've kind of talked about my feelings about like materials and all that stuff. It's up to you if you want to keep them. What I would definitely do is clean them up. Right? Like that is just disconnected. So I don't know, maybe it would be nice to actually clean that up a little bit. Because it's the small stuff that matters, right? Gradient, bits of grunge maps. Yeah, so like your texture, your material breakdowns, I'm personally not a fan of. But that's totally up to you if you want to present it, right? Again, what we're missing here is like a really quick overview. I would love to see like the textures of this thing, right? But then I'll need to wait a little bit. Okay, it's still loading in. Let's have a look here. Like base color. Wireframe is looking pretty dense in certain areas. Right, like yeah. And it's like the thing that you don't really get is just the thing laid out like onto like a flat sheet, right? So like the whole game art thing again. Having it presented in that way. Where again you have 2D assets, the textures, and then like a little bit of a breakdown description, right? More than enough. Breakdown. More than enough. Okay, so like a quick and easy win here is, I mean, it's not going to be quick, right? But you do have to pay attention to like how this is presented, because this is like the easiest way to present something, right? It's like throw it in like an empty, thrown it into like an empty scene with like a very basic lighting setup, and it's like you immediately suck out like, oh, like this person didn't do effort on this, right? That's the immediate vibes that I'm getting from this, and you never want to have that. So make it like a daytime version of your scene, right? You could still have them presented like in this way. I don't think there's anything bad with it, but also don't well, what I mean is you could still have them like aligned like this, but then do a little bit more with like the background, right? Like have like a fake wall or something like that with a title that you have, something like that, right? Like something that adds or elevates this from like, oh, I just put them in like an empty scene and that's it. Cool. see. All assets in the scene, other than some textures and small scatter props, were handmade for this environment. Special thanks to Israel. Blah, blah, blah. Okay, so here's another interesting thing. So if you say all assets were made by myself, apart from a couple of scatter props, I want to know which ones you've made and which ones are scatter props. Right? Like you could list it, you can make it a visual thing. But again, you want to remove like all the questions from like someone that might be looking at this. Because it's like, oh, small scatter props. You mean the wheels? Like all this stuff? So you didn't make like any of these things apart from like the gas meter? Is that what we're thinking? Right, you wanna remove like all the doubt that you can from the whole process. Cool, yeah. Then we move on to this. I think I kind of set my piece on this like in a work in progress Wednesday as well. But let's actually quickly look at the presentation of it. Oh, got a GIF. Hell yeah. That's cool. A little bit of GIF. It's missing the game art aspect, right? Like I want to see breakdowns of like individual props and like the way that you approach individual props. I want to see that here, or maybe the textures that you've made. Anything that you were in charge of, right? Like try to separate that out from the whole team aspect. And yeah, have your stuff on display. Because right now I'm looking at the work of the entire team, but I don't know what you did. So I kind of can't add any value. I can't really add any value to you as an individual working on this project, if you know what I mean. Like, it's very hard to distinguish that. Because you do say it here, right? Like, I worked on the hair building, 26 crumbs, and the garden remedies. Just make it visual. Like, have it on, like, a page where you say, like, hey, these are the props that I did. Cool. Oh, let's have a look. Skip to this one. Yep, it's cool. Like very, very atmospheric lighting. I like the shot as well. Even though it kind of goes against to how you would normally light stuff, right? It kind of has like a very moody feel to it. Okay. Yeah, I think for this one, I'm sure that we already talked about this one. Like, I don't think we did on the portfolio review, but I think in Whip Wednesday I said that it would be nice to have more game art displays. Or maybe it wasn't like a community chat when we were just chilling in chat. It could also be that. But yeah, the game art thing, I'm not going to beat a dead horse, right? I think that's going to be very important here. And this is going to score you like easy points, right? Like if you just, the only thing that's really missing is like, how did you approach it? Like, what do your textures look like? Did you make the most out of your UV space? How many triangles is this? Like all that kind of stuff, right? Like, I don't know. I don't know any of it. And if you can answer all those questions before I need to ask them, like, such a benefit. Such a benefit. This one is pretty dark. Let's see. Free assets used, bridge and sketchfab. Okay. But what assets? Like there's again, like there's no indication of what you did and what you got from bridge or sketchfab, right? So it's very hard at this point to determine what is yours and what isn't. Like I can make a guess, right? I can make an estimated guess, but yeah, that's not gonna That's not going to do anything good, right? Because, for example, what could happen if a recruiter looks at this and they're like, oh, the free assets used, Megascan and Bridge and Sketchfab. Cool. So I'm going to assume that everything in here is just made with free assets. So it becomes more about like the composition. Well, honestly, like you kind of explain it here, right? I enjoyed using the work. Learn about lighting and set dressing. Okay, so this is purely lighting and set dressing then. Okay, should have read a bit more. You know, maybe I should be paying a bit more attention. Okay, so this is more of like a composition and lighting thing. Best case scenario, you waste time in the interview clarifying things which ideally should be clarified. Learned that lesson before. Yeah, but that, as you said, that's the best case scenario, right, Scott? Because that is what happened, and like that happens to me too, right? But if you can avoid that, like, oh my god, yeah. I mean, there's no statistic, right? There's no statistic for the amount of job offers that I wasn't a part of just because I didn't show anything on my portfolio. I think, oh man, if people knew the stats or those stats were like publicly available, everyone's portfolio would look completely different. Yeah, so Alan, I think you know what I'm gonna say, right? Like, let's do a little recap here. So the first one is definitely game art, right? Like, game art is king. Like, show me what you've done in the textures. Show me some UVs. Show me the wireframes. Show the poly counts. Like, all that kind of stuff. Super relevant of getting a job in game art. Because yeah, the more that you do it, the more that we can be on the other side and be like, oh, cool, yeah, this looks good. Check. We're basically going through like a mental checklist whenever we look at people's portfolios, right? Where it's like, oh, topology, check. Wireframe, like, knows where to use poly count, check. Knows the workflow as well, right? Like baking stuff down instead of using bevels, check. All that kind of stuff kind of turns into a checklist, and the more you show up front, the better it is. I would say second is some quick and easy wins in your case. Are going to be lighting and atmospheric improvements. Oh. What I mean by that, especially hacking in progress, right? That can definitely use like a lighting upgrade. The second project that you did with a team is very flat at the moment. No interesting things when it comes to light. I think you can just level it up to the next level by introducing like a little bit of an atmosphere, like a little bit of a lighting adjustment in there. Maybe making it magic hour, right? It's a trope, but it's a trope for a reason, you know? Like, it adds like a little nice atmosphere to it. Obviously the best example of that is the gas station that you did, where it kind of has like a lot of contrast. It's kind of trying to set the mood, and that's where the atmosphere comes in, right? Like, adding fog cards, like adding depth, adding volumetric fog, like that can really take that piece to the next level. And then also paying attention to, this is something that I didn't bring up when I was looking at it, but I did make a note of it. Pay attention to some of the details, right? Like, I'll bring one of them up, so I'll skip it for now. Like, I'll finish the recap. And then number 3. What would number 3 be? So we have game art, we have lighting and atmosphere, and then man, I would say that game art is probably the most important thing. I'm almost inclined to just add it again, you know? Because at this point, it's kind of hard to tell, like, how should I say this? it's kind of hard to tell if I know what you're doing is correct, right? I can kind of tell with the pillar, for example, right? That it is optimized, and I also know the topology that you did for it, and I think you were going through like a rework, if I'm not mistaken. And that was looking good, right? So I know in the background that you can do it. It's just, if I don't have that additional context of you working on it and we're sitting in like a voice chat, and it doesn't matter, right? Like if no one on the outside sees it, then yeah, then it doesn't matter, right? That's the blunt truth of it. So I would definitely say the game art and the lighting is definitely going to be important here. And with that, okay, I'll add a third one. Like with that, with the lighting and the atmosphere upgrade, like you're probably going to get like a lot of thumbnail improvements as well. But that's more like a benefit of the second one, and then just re-render it, and it's going to look way better. It's going to present way better. Because my gut at this point tells me that you can do the work, right? Like especially the gas pump looks good. We looked at the wireframe; it looks good. So I think you can do the work. I think what is really lacking is just the presentation of it, right? The presentation is the thing that kind of lacks at this point. Also, last thing before I forget, that little bonus thing that I wanted to talk about, right? With the attention to detail. It's like, what's a good shot that we can look at it? Okay. For example, this, right? I love this, right? Like this stuff, like the grime, and you can really tell that like cars have been parked there, and there's like vertex painting paths that you've done. Like it's kind of nice. Maybe all we're missing here are some, I don't know, some tire treads maybe, or something like that, right? But the thing that kind of irks me the most is that you have like a really nice dirt here, but then there's no effect on like this top edge, right? Like this little top edge, or like, I don't know what you call it, like this divider, let's call it, feels pristine compared to like the very dirty like floor that it's attached to, right? So it causes this disconnect of like, oh, the dirt is all over the place, but then this thing is pretty pristine, right? And we can probably point out like a whole bunch of those extra things. We don't really need to, right? But that's probably what I'll say with like attention to detail, right? The same can probably be applied here, right? Like if we really start looking for it, like these feel new, right? I don't know if that's the intent. Like it doesn't feel like it's supposed to be there. It kind of feels very fake. I don't really know what this material is supposed to be. I think it's rust or paint. I don't know, right? Like I'm obviously being very blunt at this point, right? But like attention to detail, like that's where you're gonna make the difference between having a decent looking portfolio and a kick-ass looking portfolio, right? Like that attention to detail, like putting in the extra time to make everything look good, and like thinking about how stuff would interact with each other and like react to each other as well. Like there's a lot there that if you get that working, that's where the magic is in making environments, you know? Like really, like it makes your stuff go from like 3D to something that could actually, like, it actually is supported by its own world building. Didn't want to make it that big of a deal, right? But I think that's like a good primer for where you would need to look next. Is really pay attention to like how does stuff interact with each other, and like all those details on top of it. Yeah, so thank you so much, Alan. I hope that helped. Thank you so much for putting your work up here as well. I know that we didn't go into like a couple of these because we've already talked about them during Work in Progress Wednesday. That being said, though, I'm really curious where you're gonna go next and how this is gonna affect the future of your work, right? Like, because I know that this demonic altar is probably the last thing that you've done, right? And if you can kind of transport like all that attention to detail and like all that craft that you put into that single prop, and then find a way to, obviously you don't want to do like unique assets for like an entire environment, but if you find ways where you can put that attention to detail and transfer that to an environment as well, I think we're going to be in like a really good position. So again, thank you so much. Good luck in the future. And I'm looking forward to seeing more of your work in the future, man. Like, keep it up. All right. Cool. So that's it for this session. What we're gonna do, we're just gonna chill out. There's a couple of things in the chat that I want to address as well. I've got a couple of questions. Oh, Lydia says the second work seems a bit unfocused because of the sky. It looks very bright and kind of overcast, but at the same time the scene is lighted with a normal sunny day look. Yes, I agree. I think the word confused. Wait, you said unfocused. I don't know where I'm getting confused from. The word unfocused is probably something that I would also describe like this second piece with. Like, it's very chaotic. It doesn't know what it wants to be, right? Like it's trying to kind of be a lot of things at the same time where it shouldn't really be. Oh, the GIF idea is amazing. I'm gonna do it from now on. Thank you, Tim, for the idea. I'm gonna steal it. Oh, this is not my idea. Like, this is a very common thing. Let's switch it over here as well. Where do we go? Camera focus. Oh, here we go. Yeah, so Aladdin is also saying, man, I hate showing my UVs. William will hate my UVs. I remember hearing him speak about UVs on your podcast. Yes, he is a die-hard UV fan. So look, Aladdin, I'm gonna tell you a secret. I would also be scared to show Will my UVs. I think a lot of people are, for good reason. But don't tell him, okay? Don't tell him. Don't tell him that I said that. Because he's gonna use that against me whenever he can. Andrea is also coming in with a question. Yeah, sorry. Andrea is also coming in with a question. What makes you think someone isn't ready for the job when you see their work / portfolio? Chat can also answer this if they want. So, it's a very good question, Andrea. But I mean, there's no surprise coming from me, right? Like, it depends on like a lot of factors, because usually when you're looking for someone to fill a job, like that job comes with like a specific key ingredients that we are looking for, right? So let's say if I was looking for an environment art position, like if I'm working on, let's pick an older project, right? Let's look at the Division. If I was looking for an environment artist working on the Division, I would probably be looking for someone who has like a lot of experience with set dressing, probably has like a little bit of an idea on how procedural tools work, because the engine is probably like set up for that. Not necessarily that they need to know how it works and like work with Houdini themselves, for example, but like they need to know how to work with those tools, and then also be ready to make like contemporary like props, right, that could fit into the Division world. Now, if we flip that on its side and then we say like what is, fuck, I was just thinking about, what's the pirate game? It just lost, like I had it on the tip of my tongue. Like the stylized pirate game that Rare is making.
Oh.
had a brains, a skull and bones. Yeah, good guess, Scott. Yeah, but it's Sea of Thieves. Yeah. Just to give like a complete opposite end of the spectrum idea, right? If you're looking for an environment artist that can work on that, then obviously you're gonna look for someone who's more comfortable with stylized art, right? That can do like sculpting, and it comes with like the attachment of like a complete set of different things that you would look for. But I know that that's a non-answer, right? So I'll try to generalize a little bit, and I'll try to make it like really general if I can. So if I were to look at a portfolio, some of the stuff that we brought up today is actually a good indication of that, right? Like I want to see an element of growth, like that you're learning and that you're really interested in like learning new things, and that you're constantly like challenging yourself to learn new things, right? And this can be very broad, right? It can be like, hey, I want to learn foliage now. I want to learn trim sheets now. I want to learn this. But it can also be, hey, I can do like a hard surface gun with sub-D modeling, but what if I'm going to challenge myself to only do it with sculpting? That's also a way to still do it within a niche, right? So people that are proactive in challenging themselves. Second is, well, I think this is more of a given, right? Like a solid base understanding of like the core elements of game art. So I mean, we're going really general, right? So I'm going general on purpose. It's understanding baking, right? Baking is crucial. Understanding composition, understanding let's see, I don't want to go too broad here as well, right? Or like too specific rather. So I would say baking, a good understanding of topology and modeling, then the composition. And composition to me can also be on a prop itself, right? Like if you make stylized things, for example, like how do you compose the thing so that it has like a lot of character? And then what was the last one? Oh, storytelling. I think storytelling is like the core thing that I'm looking for, because a lot of people just make stuff based on a concept of something or something that they have in mind, but they completely forget about the storytelling element of it. And to me, the more that I start, like the more that I do environments, or the more that I look at people's work, like the main thing that I think can be like a really selling factor is always the storytelling. Like you can use it as a guide for everything, right? Like if you have a good story in the beginning and you use that throughout the project, like that can really inform like how you approach stuff, like what assets you need to make, like how big do you need to go, like that can all be contained with the story. So I would say something like that, right? If I wanted to go like pretty generic. But hey, I'm diving into the world of making video tutorials, and that exact question is one of the things that I'm currently thinking of. So hopefully at a certain point we'll see like a video tutorial about like how to make a good portfolio, because I think that would be awesome. I know that we've already done one, right? But that was more in the podcast form. I feel like I've learned so much over the years that it would be nice to come back to it and like really condense it and make it like really actionable advice this time, instead of us more discussing a portfolio. But yeah, I hope that helped. I hope that helped, Andrea. And thank you so much for the good question. That was a great question. Scott types faster. Damn it, man, you make me spill my coffee on my phone. Hopefully Will didn't hear my secret. Yeah, I know, right? Oh my god. Okay. I think this is a good point to leave it off. Again, thank you so much for all being here. I love that we have like around 15 to 20 people here. I can't believe that. Like, I appreciate each and every one of you for being here. And yeah, I'll just leave it off with like, go check out like some of the other content that we make. Go to beyondextent.com, check out all the free resources that we put out there. And yeah, I wish you all a nice day and stay creative. Bye bye.